Greetings. Welcome to a Simmers Morning Skate for VancouverHockeyInsider.com. Rob Simpson with you with my delightful guest, charming and delightful, some have said, Paul Edmonds, the radio voice of the Winnipeg Jets. Paulie?
Well, those would be a couple of adjectives I guess you could use. Some don't use them very often. Charming and delightful.
He's been called.
I've been called worse.
You've been called Peter Griffin.
Yes, I have.
You showed me a photo earlier. I thought I was looking at Family Guy.
It's funny that you mentioned that.
Yes.
Because I have never really watched the show. I know who the character is, but I have been called Peter Griffin many, many times by other people, including yourself.
I can let you know there are similarities. Let's start the clock. Starting the clock. You got 6 minutes, Paulie.
Okay.
You're going to preview the Central Division for us. We'll touch on the Canucks and the Jets, although last year it was just one big annihilation, like a sweep-de-deep-de-doo for the old Winnipeg Jets over the Canucks. I think you beat Bruce Boudreau twice and you beat Rick Tocchet once, and it was not really pretty. And there was a lot of goals scored for the Jets. The Jets' offense likes to see that orca on that jersey. They go nuts.
Well, I mean, Vancouver has always been a bit of a tough nut to crack for the Winnipeg Jets, and they've got some great pieces. And listen, I think we all like Bruce Boudreau. He was always approachable as a media member or broadcaster. But I really noticed a bit of a turn in the Vancouver Canucks when Rick Tocchet took over. Not immediately, but afterward. And he sort of laid his stamp on this team and how they were going to play. So I would expect the Vancouver Canucks, Simmer, will be different this year. Same pieces in a lot of respects. Good goaltending, Thatcher Demko, great young defenseman in Quinn Hughes, and Elias Peterson, is an excellent forward, and they just need some protection for him because I noticed the Winnipeg Jets would kind of key on him and other teams across the National Hockey League and try to get him off his game. So there's some good young pieces there, and I think the Vancouver Canucks are a team that's up and coming. Whether they're playoff bound this year, I'm not so sure. That's becoming more of a tougher division, the Pacific. Certainly, I think Calgary wants to bounce back as well. So that's another team that's going to be pushing in there along with the Los Angeles Kings and certainly the Edmonton Oilers. And the list goes on with Vegas, the defending Stanley Cup champion. So it might be a difficult road to hoe. So Vancouver, looking to make some improvements with a new head coach that had, an opportunity to kind of get his feet wet last year. But Winnipeg Jets have always sort of played fairly well in Vancouver. One of the reasons is there's always so many Jet fans there because there's so many expat Winnipeggers that live, in the lower mainland in Vancouver, and they go and support their team. So always a good series between the two of them. We'll see what happens this year in the 3-game set. I do believe that there are 2 games this year in Vancouver because there was 2 in Winnipeg last year, only 1 in Van. So I have to tell you this, Vancouver, of all the cities that we travel to in the National Hockey League, and we get to go to some great locales, there's no question about it. Vancouver would be one of my favorites. It would be top 5. There's no doubt about it, just for the city itself. And then the hockey atmosphere is excellent. A great building, knowledgeable fans, and a good rivalry with Western Canadian teams.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, it might just come down to wild cards again. Probably will in the case of the Canucks. And therefore, they have to keep just as close as eye on the Central Division as they do on the Pacific Division. So you're going to break that down a little bit for us. So top to bottom here, the depth and what's happening with Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, etc. What are we looking at here? And who's maybe pecked up a little bit and who's maybe slipped down?
Well, I don't think the heavyweights change. I think Colorado and Dallas will be that. And, depending on what happens with Gabe Landeskog, there was a couple of omissions in that lineup with Colorado after this past season. JT Compher going to Detroit. They lose a big piece there. And can Gabe Landeskog come back? Eric Johnson isn't there anymore. A stale, a stalwart on their defenseman on their blue line for a long, long time. And he signs elsewhere in Buffalo. So, they've lost a couple of pieces from being a year removed now from a Stanley Cup championship. And Dallas was trending in the right direction, lose out to Vegas in the conference final. Interesting because people in Dallas are expecting their team to make more noise this year because they've sold out the lower bowl as a result of them getting to the conference final and losing to Vegas. So I think Dallas might have an uptick. slightly, but it will be the two heavyweights, of course, in Colorado and Dallas that I think are going to be vying for top spot in the division and maybe in the conference as well. I don't see a difference with Minnesota. They, like the Dallas Stars, didn't really lose anybody other than Matt Dumba. So their team is still intact. They've got good goaltending in Gustafsson. You have a guy that's hard to stop in Kirill Kaprizov with 40 goals last year. I think you could pretty much go 1, 2, 3 with those three teams, maybe a shift as to who finishes first overall in the division, and it might be Dallas this year. I think Winnipeg will vie for a wild card spot or maybe third spot in the division. There's going to be some interest there from the Jets to see how they function under a bit of a new forward core looking team with Blake Wheeler gone and also with Pierre-Luc Dubois out the door as well. And 3 new pieces coming in via that trade with the Los Angeles Kings that sent PLD out to the West Coast. So Gabriel Velarde will be the biggest piece. He'll probably play in the top line. You're going to look at Alex Iafallo, a proven NHLer, on the second line, and Rasmus Kupari. And the Jets have all 3 of these guys under contract now, coming into your bottom 6 and playing that kind of role with maybe a penalty kill sort of duty slapped onto him as well. Goaltending won't be a problem. We see what Connor Hellebuck has done. The blue line hasn't changed. What's going to be interesting is who's going to kind of move around in the bottom of that division. I see Arizona being a bit of an improved team with some young pieces. I really like Clayton Keller. You know, it's going to be interesting with Connor Bedard. That line with Connor Bedard, Taylor Hall, and Radish is going to be very interesting for me. They're going to put some points on the board. There's no question about it for Chicago. But I don't think that there's going to be enough there for them to push to be a contender to get to a playoff spot. But they will be a different team, and they will be fun to watch, certainly with, I think, the generational player that Connor Bedard is in that top line. Nashville, is this Cody Glass's team now? I guess we'll get to see that, but they're into a bit of a rebuilding mode as well. And, you know, St. Louis, I mean, same thing. There's been a lot of guys out. Their captain, Ryan O'Reilly, moved out to Toronto last year, now signs in Nashville. Is he enough to kind of turn things around? I think the bottom remains the same in the Central Division. I don't see a lot of movement there or a lot of teams challenging for a playoff spot. They might kind of reshuffle the deck chairs as to where they finish. But I think that the Central remains the same. And then I believe your top 4 teams in the Central were also going to be your top 4 teams that get into the Western Conference playoffs by virtue of a wild card entry as well, and that being the Winnipeg Jets.
Quickie follow-up, because we're out of time. You got things to do. You're a very busy man. Is there a win now?
A lot of invoices.
Win now urgency. You got 2 very big contracts expiring next summer, and one of them, of course, Connor Hellebuck, the other one Scheifele.
Undoubtedly. And so what are you looking at here? Are you looking at maybe divesting yourself of both or one, and moving if things don't look very good for you come trade deadline, the new year? Or are you looking to maybe sign both long term or one of them? A lot of sort of balls orbiting into the options that Kevin Cheveldayoff will have for those 2 players. I mean, it's hard to replace 42 goals if you want to move Mark Scheifele down the road, right? He's also been a longtime Jet, drafted, developed, and played here his entire career. Same with Connor Hellebuck. This is a guy that literally got you to the playoffs last year in goal. So tough to replace as well. The best thing that the Winnipeg Jets have done, though, quick, is they have insulated themselves. They got a guy in that won a Stanley Cup with Vegas last year, played for 3 years here in Lauren Brossoit as a backup to Connor Hellebuck. I think if anything moves on your goaltending side, you've insulated yourself with Lauren Brossoit, and you'll feel a little bit better about moving Connor Hellebuck if you have to at the deadline, or if something falls on your lap where you just can't refuse the offer.
I just saw Brossoit training, skating with a bunch of guys yesterday. By the way, Connor Hellebuck will be curious to see. You know, you want to keep a great goaltender around. As you said, they've insulated him, but curious to see if he finally gets to play with Team USA in an Olympics. An entire generation of players for multiple countries have had to skip Olympics because of the location or whatever else. And be curious to see if he finally gets to pull that off in Italy in 2026. Paulie, outstanding stuff as always. We'll see you down the road with the old Winnipeg Jets. Be well, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Thank you.
Simmer, my pleasure. Anytime.